Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome everyone. So today we will continue our lessons in Unit 3 and today's lesson is 3.2 Nature's Food Chains. In this lesson we will learn how can living things survive through the food chains. So for example, we see in the pictures in front of us the way of the cycle of the food chains. Okay, this is a cycle because it keeps continuing. So first we have the mice, okay, eating the plants, snake eating the mice, and birds eating the mice. So there is a circle that represent the food chain in here, and we want to understand how can the food chain continue happening. Okay, so by reading activity 2 we will read and listen to the context and check the ideas in activity 1. So the idea is how can the animals survive, how does the food chain keep continuing. So listen together for the audio while reading the paragraphs in activity 2.
Track 19.
The photos show us a food chain in action. A food chain shows the relationship between living things and their sources of food. All animals and plants are important in our planet's ecosystem because all living things are part of food chains. Every animal on Earth depends upon a food chain for its survival. A food chain always starts with a plant. In this process, the plant is called a producer because it makes its own food from the energy it gets from the sun. The next link in the food chain is called a consumer, and there are usually 3 levels. The first group are primary consumers. These are creatures who only eat plants. They are called herbivores. Rabbits, mice, and insects, such as grasshoppers, are examples of herbivores. Some marine wildlife, such as krill, are also primary consumers. The second group are secondary consumers. These are small animals like frogs, lizards, spiders, smaller birds, and marine creatures such as squid and octopuses. They are carnivores, whose main diet is meat. This group eats other animals in the primary consumer group. Next, there are tertiary consumers, who are usually larger animals like reptiles, birds, or large fish. These animals eat the smaller creatures in the secondary consumer group. There are also consumers whose food comes from plants and meat. They are called omnivores. These creatures can be secondary or tertiary consumers. The top predators, who are at the top of the food chain, are lions, tigers, crocodiles, sharks, and eagles. They haven't got any natural enemies. Can you think of one more top predator?
Okay, so like we have listened, there are types of animals. We have first not an animal, we have the food chain main point, which is a producer, because it makes its own food. That's why we call it a producer. Then we have the rest are all consumers. And the first type of consumers are primary consumers, like rabbits, mice, and insects. Then we have a secondary consumer, like small birds, spiders, frogs, lizards. Then we have the tertiary consumers. They are usually large animals like reptiles, birds, or large fish. And then we have a type of animals that use plants or eat plants and also meats. They are called omnivores. The final section here is the predators. They are the top of the food chain. The predators are like lions, tigers, crocodiles, sharks, and eagles. Okay, so moving to activity 3, we will read the same text, but this time we will match each living thing to a word in blue. Okay, so we have krill, seal, algae, polar bear, and squid. We will try to put them in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types of animals, right? So, for example, let's say krill. Krill is a type of fish, right? It's a type of fish. So it should be under territory consumers, all right? Let's say, for example, a polar bear. Polar bears are predators like lions, tigers, crocodiles, and sharks. All right, so let's try to do activity 4. What is the habitat of the living things in activity 1 and 3? So let us look at these type of animals, okay? Do they share the same habitat? What about activity 1? This one. Pictures we have here, the mice, the snake, the birds. Do they share different habitats? What do you think? Some types of habitats are forests, deserts, oceans, and ice waters. So these are all the different types of habitats, right? So try to guess, where does the seal live? Where does the polar bear live? At the same place or different places? So let's look at the answers. So in activity 1, we have the birds, the snake, the mice. They live in these habitats: forests, fields, and deserts, right? In activity 3, we have animals that live in the ocean, like the squid, coastal areas, seals, okay, sea ice in Arctic region, polar bears, and seals. So polar bears and seals, they share the same habitats, all right? Now let us do the order, okay? We will try to reorder the animals we have here in a food chain, okay? So the first food chain here should be the producer, which is algae, right? We'll put it the first one, C, algae. Now, what about the consumers? Who's the first consumer in this list? The krill, the seal, the squid, or the polar bear? So we already know that the polar bear is at the top of the food chain here, right? Because he is a predator. So we should put it at the top here, the final part, D, okay? Now, we should start with the primary, like, for example, creatures who eat only plants. So do we have any animal here that eats plants? The krill, okay, the krill. So the second one should be A, should be A. And you can do the rest. Here is the answers. C, A, then E, squid, then B, the seals. And we can also see the type. A krill is a primary consumer, like we said. Squid is a secondary consumer. Seals are territory consumers, and the polar bear is a predator. All right. Finally, activity 5. Find all the sentences with relative clauses in the text. So what are relative clauses? Here are the relative clauses. That, which, where, when, who, whose, whom. For example, whose main diet is meat. This all is called a relative clause. A relative clause. This one is a relative pronoun. A relative pronoun. But the whole sentence is called a relative clause. A relative clause. So we use which relative pronoun to talk about people and things? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 relative pronouns. And which one we use to talk about people and things? That, which, where, when, who, whose, whom. Number 2, we use to talk about people, and we use to show that something belongs to something or someone. So try to take your time and do the exercise. If you have finished, you can check the answers here. Number 1, that. We use that to talk about people and things. That animal, that person. Number 2, to talk about people, we say who. Who is Ahmed, or who left, who did that. We talk about people. Number 3, whose, to show that something belongs to something or someone. This pen, whose pen is this? Or we can say whose main diet is meat if we are going to use this type of sentences. Activity 6, work in a small group, research and represent a food chain. You can select a food chain of your choice from the internet or from your mind, and try to make 2 examples. Draw a diagram and practice explaining the food chain to each other. You can present your diagram to your class. Okay, good. So this is a nice activity you can do. And that's it for today's lesson. Thank you for listening, and see you later.